And we're still up and running. David, how are you? Just waiting for David. A little sketchy in terms of the internet.
Hey, great.
Nice to see you. I mean, the program is now, the flagship station for the program is now Rumble, mainly because, and I think this was inevitable. I'm not saying I didn't expect it, but YouTube is starting to pull down my videos, including one with you, I might add. And I think that this is a major purge going on with a lot of people that don't genuflect to the establishment on YouTube. And they're going to let me back on, but I just don't trust YouTube at this point, especially now that I'm about to launch the program next week. So now I'm going to be trying Rumble live, and I figured out how to do this. It was a little bit of a subscription, but it's reasonable. And the program, the flagship station is now going to be, and is Rumble. And as long as I understand that Rumble is the fallback station now, as people are jumping ship on YouTube, they're going for the lifeboat, which is Rumble. So as long as Rumble lets me do what I do, I'm fine with Rumble. I mean, I suppose I might also go to Odyssey. We'll see, but Rumble seems to be the main one to do right now. And I also will note that I have my website up, which is charlesmoskowitz.com. And on that website, I list about 10 other live streams that are simultaneously carrying the show, including Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitch, VK, Twitter, YouNow, Trovo, DLive, Podomatic, and Picardo. And I'm archiving on about 25 other sites, including some pretty big ones like iHeartRadio, iTunes, and Spotify. So, that's where the show is at this point. I'm looking forward to the live launch, which is going to be Monday of next year, the 1st of January. And I'm lining up various interesting guests. What are you up to, David?
Hey, great. Yeah, I had my debate talk hosted in New Zealand with Ben Watkins on whether souls exist Sunday. So I think that was pretty well received. That was a good conversation. And, the regular week in review. So besides that, that was the only streaming I did this week. So I just did a lot of research like I usually do. Business, my e-business is, with the holidays, a little heavier than, so I'm selling quite a few things.
That's good. You sell books, right, David?
Books, CDs.
Okay. Now, I happened to listen to your interview with Adam Green, and I thought you handled yourself very well. I mean, you really brought it to him. He has a wealth of information regarding relatively obscure quotes to make his case, and relatively obscure rabbis to make his case against, not only against Judaism, but he has this whole conspiracy that Christianity is a Jewish conspiracy, and that it's, and all the rest. And he does this very tricky thing in that he'll take the quote, which he delivers very eloquently, and he interprets it in a way that fits his particular agenda. Now, I just want to mention one thing, because I think he's not always completely honest, frankly. I'm going to mention one thing that he brought up. And this was in the book of Acts, when Paul the evangelist is in Antioch, which had a very large Jewish community at that time. And he was debating whether or not he should answer all of the non-Jews who wanted to become part of this movement that involved Jesus as the Messiah. And he wanted to bring them in, but he wanted to, at the same time, preserve Jewishness. And could these people, become kosher? I mean, were they willing to, have circumcision? I mean, the answer was no. So he had a dilemma, and he was told to go back to Jerusalem to meet with the Christian authorities, the early church, who had like a government there. And it was headed by St. James, who was Jesus's brother and who inherited the institution, and who was basically there for, they say, about 30 years. He was a fairly devout and observant Jew. And so Paul shows up at this council headed by St. James. they have a very vigorous argument. Apparently, there was some real unpleasant things exchanged. But at the end of the day, they came to a compromise where they said, you can go forward, you can proselytize, you can bring people in, as long as they observe certain fundamental concepts, which we now know because of the rabbis as the Noahide covenant. And those were things like, believe in one God, don't steal, very general, universal themes. And so that was the compromise, and that was really a major step toward the birth of this new religion, basically. Now, Adam Green seized on this, which is in the book of Acts, and he said, you see, this was a Jewish conspiracy because the Jews wanted to impose the Noahide covenant on the world, and they used this as a means to do that. But the problem is that he made that up. There's no evidence that the Jews had anything to do with this. St. Paul spoke with St. James and the early Christians, and they're the ones that came up with this formula. It had absolutely nothing to do with the Jews of Judea, or it had nothing to do with the Sanhedrin. They were completely out of that loop. This was a whole separate thing. So I only bring this up because I think that he takes liberties in making his conspiracy case that somehow Christianity is a conspiracy against the world that was cooked up by Jews.
Yeah, I tried to. When he mentioned that, I said I'm not a New Testament scholar, and from a Judeo point of view,
right.
We don't consider the New Testament authoritative in the way that maybe we would consider even Talmud to have some form of divine inspiration. Yeah, but he hasn't laid out his case of like a conspiracy, like who conspired. And basically, the main element of his case is who benefits from his perspective, like a post hoc anachronism of who benefits, and then a bunch of quotes that support his
right.
his view. And in terms of making good programming, like he didn't even really tell me what he wanted to talk about, and he just kind of hits me with these quotes. So
right.
if he wanted to make for better programming, he would have told me the quotes beforehand. And
well, and there's also no conversation really. He just gives you the quotes, and then you have to answer it. And then at the end, he said, "Well, I hope you're happy as living as a slave." Has to get the last word in, but
even if he was to say like, so if Paul conspired, like who did he conspire with?
Right.
And
no
then
proof of that.
Even the basic point that I say, like the reason some things like his concept that one thing that that Esav, that the church represents Esav in terms of the long-term fulfillment of the prophecies of Jacob and Esav, that I would say the majority of the rabbis hold of, and that's why he has no problem finding countless Orthodox rabbis on YouTube backing up his claim about the church, not necessarily Jesus, that
right,
Jesus,
that they view the
but
church,
the church
as
becoming the vehicle of Esav. I say the majority of the Kabbalists and sages, that was the interpretation.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, I've heard that. But the thing is that contradicts his whole conspiracy theory right there, because if the rabbis of the Talmudic period viewed the early church as Esav, which is the opposite, the enemy of Jacob, then why would they have conspired to hoist Christianity on the world as a Jewish conspiracy? It just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I guess it may say, okay, if the default position from our point of view is that that it's true that God chose the Jewish people for a certain purpose and the prophets and these various things, or if you're a Christian, you have a default position that it's true, and that so if you're just trying to explain from a atheistic or agnostic point of view the historical Jesus, then you're going to have to approach it scholarly, where you have a bunch of possibilities and in a thorough examination of the evidence and various
right.
that typical university departments,
he does
even
have
Israelis
a certain,
do.
and he does have a certain
Israeli
scholarly.
heretics.
He has a certain scholarly approach, but the thing that we have to keep in mind is that he does not always go with authoritative sources. and that he interprets those sources in a way that is at variance with conventional Jewish understanding, and as is Christianity generally, which is fine. I mean,
And then just
Christianity,
skip back like, oh, well, I don't believe it. Nothing's really authoritative. It doesn't matter. It's all, I mean,
whatever I say it is.
and I mean, I think he misses, like a key point like that if you're a believer, no matter what happens, you're going to try to interpret and try to find God's hand in history. So the fact that he finds so many rabbis that make these claims about oh, this is just the way that God's hand is working in history. God is using the church or non-Jewish nations as a vehicle to fulfill some sort of prophecy or vehicle of progress. So like, of course, any believer, that's how you're supposed to look at things. So for like a post hoc anachronization, that any scenario, especially in Israel among Orthodox Jews, like even modern news, you'll find people that try to find Bible verses and Bible codes. But of course, you're going to find countless rabbis on YouTube that are explaining
Sure.
that, like, yeah, of course, this was God's hand, including, even the worst tragedies, like the Holocaust. So to use that as like a post hoc conspiracy, like, oh, the rabbis must have planned it because you found rabbis afterwards that gave an interpretation of how God's divine will was working in history, is almost nonsensical. And so if his claim is exclusively based on who benefits, and it's some sort of questionable who benefits, and saying the typical Judeo understanding of the straight prophecy that I mentioned countlessly in Genesis, where Esau lives by the sword, and he actually uses the language as a slave to Yaakov, but when Yaakov behaves poorly, that Esau turns the sword against Jacob. And there's different ways of interpreting that verse, and that's basic Judeo understanding. That's why he has no problem finding countless texts and rabbis that look at the West or the Church, England in general, under that paradigm that the same hand that helps us when we're good hits us when we're bad, because that's the way the Bible lays it out. So I mean, and then also, I'm not sure if you thought about that much, the Mashiach ben Yosef that I mentioned, not too commonly understood, and I would say that Jesus might fit that protocol in the concept that Mashiach ben Yosef dies but paves the path for Mashiach ben David. And then I wanted to clarify that the Lubavitch Rebbe is probably the quintessential example of what Mashiach ben David would look like. But if you're a Jew, with our typical belief, it doesn't really matter who Mashiach ben Yosef is, because God forbid he's a martyr, and that just paves the path. And then as I said, most of those verses that, a lot of times he sounded like a basic Christian that was trying to prove to me that the Hebrew prophets are predicting Jesus. And from my understanding is that basically those verses refer to all of our martyrs. That you want to make it
they
specific.
Do. The suffering servant is the Jewish
this
people.
one martyr. They say like, no, this is refers to anybody that suffers for the greater cause.
That's right. It's the suffering servant of Isaiah, according to rabbis, is the Jewish people. People who have died because they were witness to God and they refused to step away from that, to the point where they actually died and they were killed for that reason. But the whole issue of the Moshiach ben David versus Joseph, I would look to New Testament text on that one, because they go way out of their way, and there's a huge portion of both St. Matthew and St. Luke where they go through meticulous proof, allegedly, according to Christian doctrines, that show that Jesus was descended from David, not Joseph, through his mother. And that Joseph, and yet, Adam Green's claim on this is actually a complete contradiction to Christianity, because he says, well, his father was named Joseph, right? Mary's husband. But Christian understanding is that Joseph was not his father. His father was God, according to the Christian hagiography. So, the guy happened to be named Joseph. That doesn't mean that he is, I mean, I suppose you could technically say that Jesus was Ben Joseph if you take away the divine element of Christianity, which I think is what Adam Green does. But if you look at the Christian understanding, then Jesus is descended from David. So the whole thing is like, it's sort of like what the rabbi said to Louis the Ninth of France when he was ready to burn the Talmuds. And he said,
Paris and Nicholas
yeah,
Donen,
Nicholas
about
Donen,
many
who was,
times.
yes,
I
right.
mentioned that almost all of the questions that he asked me that we talked about are the same questions that Donen posed to
the Pope and then to Nicholas. I mean, and then to Joe.
It's really not. I mean, you mentioned that, like, okay, the Nazis or whatever. Like, the reality is, almost none of these questions are new, and they were almost all posed.
That's
to,
right, and that was answered. That was answered in the Middle Ages when basically Nicholas Donen, who was a Jewish apostate and heretic, went to the Pope and said, "There's this thing called the Talmud, and it has blasphemy against Jesus," and then the Pope said, well, why don't you take it up with Louis the Ninth of France? He went to France, he spoke with Louis the Ninth, and Louis the Ninth responded by burning all the Talmuds of France. But in the course of their disputation, the rabbi said, the Talmud mentions the name Jesus, but not every person named Jesus would necessarily be Jesus of Nazareth, just like not every person named Louis is king of France. And they say that in fact, E. Michael Jones, I said this on my program. He said that was the birth of Jewish humor, which I suppose it was. But the point is that these are things that have been out there for a long time, and the fact is that once this came to light, even whether or not there were unpleasant references to Jesus in the Talmud, and there very well may have been, they were taken out of the Talmud. They were edited out because the Pope asked the rabbis to do that because he said it was too inflammatory, and the rabbis complied. So this is something that was done, 500-600 years ago. It's like old stuff.
Yeah, I say, like, I somewhat judge him favorably because, but I mean, if you look at it, that if you want to disprove Christianity, you don't need to go with the Jewish conspiracy. And there's plenty of scholarship on the historical Jesus. I mentioned the Atwill, who spoke with Claire Call last week. Caesar's Messiah. There's countless theories on the historical Jesus. Bart Ehrman, is the rise of Christianity, and so it's interesting. I kind of enjoy the conversation because I study and think about this stuff all the time, and like I think every yeshiva student is kind of like secretly preparing for the time when like, God forbid, we're going to be called before some sort of panel of our peers, of our non-Jewish peers or Christians, and be forced to ask these questions. So I think, I don't know if you agree, but I think like every diligent yeshiva student or just a person who takes Judaism seriously is kind of preparing for these potential disputations that might arise. Sure. So in that case, I kind of enjoyed, and I also made the point, I don't know if you agree, that he's like, well, will you denounce this? Will you denounce this? And I was like, I don't think ideas need to be denounced. Like, if it's okay, like Jeffrey Epstein or something, or even sometimes the actions of the state of Israel, okay, like I'll denounce that. It's an action. But I don't think beliefs or ideas need to be denounced. And it's like, okay,
no.
like Chabad,
you can criticize specifics. I certainly have been very critical of Israel's public policies, but to denounce the state of Israel as a right to exist, that's another question. But, I want to bring up just another issue here, because I've noticed that this is something that seems to be bubbling a little bit more toward the surface. And I will specifically mention an interview I listened to with E. Michael Jones, who was talking to Timothy Kelly from In These Times. You know who he is? Tim Kelly.
Was that the one on the Holocaust? God forbid.
Yes, he's there.
I did catch like the first half of that.
There seems to be a gradual move toward Holocaust denial that seems to be increasing and it seems to be coming up a little bit. It's sort of coming out of the woodwork, and I was really quite surprised that E. Michael Jones is going that low. I mean, to me, I'm debating whether to have him on. I know he will come on with me because he always does when I ask, but I just don't know. I mean, to me, this is like, it's a little bit beyond the pale for me. Now, he didn't come right out and deny the Holocaust, although there is a writer on his magazine, The Culture Wars, who virtually does, in someone else's guy, Stanford. I don't know who he is, but he was like certainly treading in those waters. I mean, I mean, I think same thing with Tim Kelly, who I think is actually a pretty good talk show host, but he also has this fixation with Jews. Do you know?
Well, we see the polling. I mean, I don't see why that's surprising. I mean, God forbid, as Jews, it might be disappointing or even scary, but it's not surprising. I mean, just like the 1619 Project or any sort of historical revisionism, and even just what happened January 6th, just something last year, or even COVID-19. I saw Peter Thiel interviewed at the Hoover Institute, and he's talking about like Bitcoin, and he's down on the U.S. He's ready to prepare for the crash of the government, and like I've been mentioning that also.
Sure.
And Peter Thiel's a pretty big name. I mean, he was the head
close
of the
advisor to
Bilderberg.
President Trump.
I'm saying if there's a conspiracy, I mean, the Bilderberg Committee, Peter Thiel was it's on Wikipedia, the head of the steering committee for the Bilderberg Group. He was the one who introduced President Trump, and he's saying that the U.S. has basically like reached the point where they're just forcing us to believe these lies, and no one's going to believe it. But yeah, I mean, where the institutions lose credibility, where there's how are you gonna know something that happened 80 years ago that happened on the other side of the ocean? So I mean, like like I'm a Jew.
So
I have
then you think
thousands
that
of
maybe,
survivors. I know quite a bit
yeah.
about World War II, but even your average educated person, I don't know why you'd expect them to have an accurate understanding of what happened.
Well, we have
World
now
War
people
II.
like at high level academics like this professor at Northwestern University who actually is questioning the existence of the Holocaust. And maybe this is part and parcel of, as you, I think, us are alluding to, an increase in the dishonesty of the establishment and the lies that we are constantly being told. And now that I'm on Rumble, I feel like I can talk about this. I feel a bit liberated. I'm a little more unleashed. Hopefully Rumble is going to stick by their word of not censoring. Maybe they will, but as of now, they're the place to go. And I will say that I think there has been a huge increase in the past couple of years of lies from an establishment and of censorship of things that might be true or might not be true. We can't know because we're not allowed to have a discussion. And that a lot of those lies are around the issue of the pandemic, which is real, but yet some of the way it's being presented by the establishment, Mockingbird media, and by establishment figures has more than a whiff of dishonesty about it, an agenda to it. There are lies around the election. I would still contend that. I mean, this is something I'm going to get into now that I'm on Rumble and get to some people who actually have some data on that. And that there are lies around those events of January 6th. And I think that most people in this country and in this world sense that and know that. But maybe that can have a boomerang effect or a backfiring effect in that there are things that are true that are now going to be viewed as lies, like the Nazi Holocaust against the Jews.
That happened a long time ago. So it's like, of course, it's not surprising that people aren't going to know what happened. You've seen the polling; the numbers are really high, like 25%, or like even in terms of like basic knowledge that like half of Americans know almost nothing. But and even with all of the museums and mandatory education in schools, but that's not surprising. But unfortunately, I'd say two things. One thing that, I mean, from E. Michael Jones' perspective, or Adam Green, is that there are a lot of Jewish institutions, like the ADL being the most prominent, that are pushing things like censorship and then make a person
That doesn't help.
skeptical of a Jewish narrative that you see, okay, here's powerful Jewish organizations that from, their point of
I
view
agree. I mean, it's
are
not
working
helpful.
against them. So it's saying, okay, if these Jewish organizations are working against them, maybe they can't uh, trust their narrative. And then also, I mean, because we argue about this all the time, that current events, something like Israel, where you see what's happening in Israel, and you see a narrative that especially in your university, and Palestinians. So if you hear it, you have a narrative. There's people being killed. It's a war.
Right.
Hundreds of people are. I mean, relatively numbers may not be that extreme, but I'm certainly like refugees. Just the fact that there's hundreds of thousands of Palestinians in America, and every university has hundreds of Palestinians that have these stories about, so to say, what Israel's doing to them. And then you have like the narratives, and on either side. Yeah, I mean, you say that who are you going to believe, and the reason, skepticism. Like I told him, I didn't think there's anything wrong with him asking questions. I don't think ideas
No,
are dangerous. I don't think asking tough questions is a bad thing. I think it's a good thing.
me too.
But when there's narratives to like the politics, okay, that we know that the U.S. we are actively helping and funding Israel in a military venue,
Sure.
and so the narrative makes a difference. So if it's a Palestinian
Well,
pushing for
but I
BDS,
don't think that
and
it's
you're saying
helpful.
that the nature of the narrative makes a difference because we're choosing one side or the other in the war.
We are, and I don't think that it's helpful for the ADL to censor opinions that don't agree. I mean, look at, we're doing this program right now. I have spent the years doing programming where I've debated and brought on people who have very extreme views, both on the left and on the right. And sometimes, but not because I want to promote those views, but because I want to debunk them and I want to argue and I want to present them. But at the same time, they have to be heard. You can't
Even just
censor.
understand them. I mean, even
Right,
say,
understand.
if E. Michael Jones is understandable, he's like, okay, the ADL and Jewish organizations are attacking me. So, God forbid, maybe this whole thing's actually made up, or, gives him
I know, it fuels
that bias, a reason for him to
Yeah,
be
I
biased.
agree. It
And I
fuels
always
their
made that point
conspiracy
to
theories. I think you're right.
Joseph
And I've
Cohen.
even heard E. Michael Jones say this. Oh, look what they're doing. The Jews are like censoring me. They're controlling the argument. That proves that the Jews are, trying to control the world, or whatever the hell he's saying. They're revolutionaries.
When we
And
make these lists, or try to sort of say ruin people's lives, like Charlottesville, where it's very clear that
not good.
there's Jewish organizations attempting to ruin these people's lives to teach them a
Right.
lesson.
And it's not a good look for Jewish organizations. They should not be involved in this kind of like heavy-handed censorship. Let them go out and do like what, frankly, you and I do.
But we are. I'm saying, I
Level.
mean, the fact is,
And debate people and
the fact is we are,
have
and it's our majority strategy.
Yeah.
I mean, you are dissidents. I mean, one thing, we're right-wing Jews, which puts us, not into the extreme, like 1 out of 4, 1 out of 5, and then being free speech, anti-censorship Jews, like willing to talk to,
right.
That probably like 1 out of 10. But is there any benefit to denying the obvious that that is the majority strategy of our people?
That's right. And I think that's the majority of strategy of our establishment. I don't know about of our people, but it's part of the Jewish federated establishment in this country that they are into censorship. And I think it's a big mistake. I don't think it's helpful. I don't think it works well. I think it backfires. I say take people on and let them and debate them and take them on. Take it rather than trying to criminalize speech and suppress bad ideas. We have to, respond to those ideas and to do it vigorously. But the whole business of people, denying the Holocaust, I mean, yes, it happened a long time ago, but I think we need to note that the Civil War happened a long time ago. The American Revolution happened a long time ago. The Magna Carta happened a long time ago. The fall of Rome happened a long time ago. But these things are history. And the Nazi Holocaust against the Jews is established history. It's mountains of evidence on so many levels. and it's really the idea that people would simply try to, jump in and rewrite it it really brings up a lot of suspicion about what their agenda is.
I don't think so. Not, to me, it's not. I mean, it's obvious. Like, I don't even think that you need some sort of nefarious motivation. Like, even just to say it's a extraordinary event that if it didn't happen, it'd hardly be believable. So like, okay, but like, we're Jews, we
Right.
know it happened. Like,
Of course we know
have
it
whole
happened. The
branches
world
of the
knows it
family that
happened.
were wiped out. It happened, but no, I mean, your average person doesn't know that it happened, and it's such an extraordinary event that I don't think denial is.
And I don't have any. I really
requires
don't.
any nefarious motive. And
Yeah, but
polling,
and as much as
polling
I,
is clear that
as much as
saying
I'm,
that one out of four, 1 out of 2 people have nefarious motives, or saying just an
yeah,
extraordinary event, and your average person is it's like, nah, it can't be.
and also, as much as I do support free speech and I have debated people on all kinds of issues, I have generally personally drawn the line on certain things, and this is one of them. I have not brought in people who deny the Holocaust. To me, that's a step too far. And I think I'm probably going to continue that. I'm debating whether or not to ask Dr. Jones to come on with me, but at this point, I just don't think that I'm going to go there. It's just a little. I mean, one of the reasons why, I mean, for years I did a program with Patrick O'Heffernan from San Francisco. We did like a left-right program. He was a man of the left, and we would bring in guests from both the left and the right, and it was fine. But after a while, things started to break down a bit between us, professionally and personally, and
It could be a bad decision. I was watching. I think it was Donahue, and maybe it was Deborah Lipstadt, or one of the big Holocaust scholars, and was going to appear on Donahue, and he wanted to have a denier there with because that's just the way they make programming, like two sides of the story, and then the whoever the Holocaust scholar was backed out. They didn't wanted to,
yeah.
And but from an
Was
educational,
Lipstadt willing to go on with that?
no, I don't think it was Lipstadt. It was someone else.
Okay.
But maybe it was. I mean, it might be before Donahue. Like, because this was Donahue.
Yeah, Donahue is known to do that kind of thing.
But I was saying that the fact that the person refused to do that, the topic didn't go forward, and just the nature. I mean, God forbid.
It's just the kind of thing. It's like the way things ended up with me and Patrick was that he finally told, the final straw for me was when he said that he no longer wanted to hear me make reference to Nazi Germany and the nature of Nazism. And I said, well, then, forget it. I'm I'm done here. I mean, that was to me the final breakdown of our friendship and of our program.
I mean, you can't, I don't think it's conceivable from, to, have a understood narrative like there were good guys and bad guys. So, people born into the world and looking like World War II. And, if you have like, even to paint the picture like the Nazis were bad guys, it may be ahistorical even to look at it that way. And that's why I say, like, the functionalism versus intentionalism, and that most non-Jewish scholars lean on the functionalist side of the Holocaust, that there might have been a few serious Jew haters or historical anti-Semitism, but the Holocaust really happened as a function of the war, not the intention of the war. And then you have maybe Jewish scholars that lean more towards intentionalism, and it's going to be a tough sell, intentionalism, even if you've looked in the evidence, or trying to say that God forbid, if it's your read on human nature, that like yes.
Well, I think that's a legitimate debate, actually, intentionalism versus functionalism, and there's elements of both. The fact, though, is that it happened, and that can't be denied. We can look at how it happened and why it happened, and some of the influences, including culpability on the part of the American State Department to deny Jewish refugees from coming into this country, and conspiring to do that. And at a time when, I'm sure you're familiar with the Evian Conference, which was chaired by the United States. Myron Taylor, a businessman, chaired it, and Roosevelt authorized it. And it basically was there to try to figure out what to do with the Jewish refugees that this is before Germany had really started the Holocaust. This is before World War II. You know, it was like in 1938 or 1939, and it was in France. And they basically decided that it was like it was kind of a whitewash. I mean, they decided no Jewish refugees would be allowed, period. And they only, not only that, but they actually told countries, certain countries in Latin America, apparently particularly the Dominican Republic, which wanted to welcome Jews, that they can't, and that they stymied Jewish, even legitimate Jewish, passports. And this would have even been within the purview of what the Immigration Act allowed in 1924. They didn't even fill those quotas, and it was really pretty bad. So there's a lot of culpability around the world. It wasn't. I mean, Nazi Germany did the Holocaust, but at that particular time of the Evian Conference, the Nazis were fairly open to the idea of deporting their Jews. And,
so I mean, we live in a more atheistic world today, and so a moralistic interpretation, and especially like the alt-right or white advocacy. I think Greg Johnson mentioned because he's like, God forbid the Holocaust happened, and the lesson to learn, so to say, for whites from his perspective is you don't want to become a minority, and if you're just going to take that cold of human nature, first lesson in the Bible is brother will kill brother. There's no moral statement on it. It's just a fact. Brother will kill brother, and if you're a minority, you're in danger of your physical safety. And
okay,
so
well, I
if,
mean,
if you want to say that, I mean, if that's a reasonable lesson to draw from that, you say that's not a reasonable lesson to draw from it, is saying that any minorities in danger of extermination, and therefore you need to make sure that your people are the majority or something like that, or you're going to leave it open. But it's like you're going to give some sort of
be a
moralistic
reasonable.
interpretation.
It depends on the situation. I mean, it's a reasonable explanation if it's a tribal society like Rwanda was, where they basically did have a genocide against the Tutsis, or
I'm saying it wasn't anything uniquely evil or wrong. It's essential human nature
not
for a
necessarily.
majority to rise up
Not
against the
necessarily.
minority.
It depends on the situation. I mean, you could say that about Turkey with regard to the Armenians. Yeah, the minority ended up getting really abused, and they didn't have a position of leverage or strength to counter that. But that is not necessarily true. I mean, it depends on the society. Yes, I suppose we should always be a bit vigilant about that when you are a minority in a country. But, in the United States hasn't done that. I mean, for the most part, there's been exceptions, but for the most part, I mean, African Americans aren't being herded into concentration camps and then sent to crematoria. Yeah, sure, we have racism, but it's like in this country we're a country of minorities. We have we send, it's a different type of a society. Now that doesn't mean you shouldn't be vigilant and that it might not change, but we have a multiracial, multi-ethnic, multi-religious society in the United States. So I don't think it's an issue here. I'm saying that in the context that yes, human nature dictates that whoever's in charge might abuse those who aren't.
I mean, Israel, I mean, you like to phrase things in a moralistic terms, and it's like, I mean, Israel is largely ran by secular people who don't phrase things in moralistic terms. And you just say like, God forbid it's a killer kill be rolled, better them than us, or God forbid better you than me. And that you could look at it and it's like, I think a lot of senior ranking Israelis look at it completely absent of morality and just, God forbid it's a killer kill be rolled.
How so?
And it's not necessarily good or bad. It's just saying that I'm going to survive. And if
Well, how do you apply that to Israel? I don't get that.
Well, I think it's common ethos in Israel that, I mean,
Israel
one thing
protects its
polling that
minorities.
that you and a lot of Jews, I'm not saying like that like the majority, but a sizable element of Jewish leadership, especially in the military establishment, looks at these things without good or bad or morality. Like, I mean, the military
I
science,
don't think that's true.
pure military science is
I don't, I don't, I don't,
you
I don't
you
agree
could
with that.
interpret pure military science absent of morality.
I don't agree with that.
And it's, well, I mean, you don't agree with that, but I'm saying like pure military
Yeah, but
science
but no,
doesn't require, you
I
could
think
look at it
military
and
science brings in an element of both morality and
you can,
practicality.
but I'm saying that you
And I
have,
think Israel does.
well, I'm saying there is an element, obviously, of morality in Israel and the
A large element of
even in the
morality.
military establishment. By saying pure military science is has no morals to it. It's about
But
victory.
there's no such
You know,
thing
saying
as pure military
it's like the game.
science.
It's like, so to say, the game of chess. The purpose is to win. The game of war. The purpose is to win.
Yeah, but we have rules, there are rules of engagement. There's no such thing as pure, to say like there's pure military science is like saying there's pure communism. There's no such thing. Military science is tempered by and is influenced by political situations, by governments, by culture, by people. It doesn't exist as a pure thing. Now, at its core, the job of a military is to defend the sovereignty of the country that they're in, and the rights of the people in that country to live in a secure place and to have a relative degree
I
of
mean, you could
freedom.
phrase it in that way, but I'm saying, like, I mean, the purpose of the military is to kill the enemies. You could
But
phrase it
that's
in a
how they, if
defense.
they
You could
have to,
phrase it
it's
in a
what's
defense
of it.
terms.
It
But
is a defense thing, and if they have to, as long as they're
well,
not
that's your
waging a war of
moralistic
conquest,
understanding. But I mean, not everyone in the
it could be
military.
abused in that a military could be used to conquer their neighbors. I don't think Israel's done that. I mean, maybe there are some exceptions. Yes, they invaded Lebanon. Maybe they shouldn't have. But the point is that in Israel, the military is there to defend the country, and that can mean killing people if they're about to kill you. And
Right,
I
but to
think that,
pretend like those voices don't exist. I mean, one thing, if you want to put it in psychological terms, statistically, about 1 in 50 people suffer psychopathy, which means that they really just don't they don't have any view of morality or good or bad, or care about the suffering of others. It's a biological born things. There have even been studies to say that psychopaths are more likely to rise to power
true.
in politics and business. So like
No,
at the
you're
head
right.
of
And
politics
power,
and
power
business,
can be corrupting.
psychopathy could be like 1 out of 5 people.
Yeah,
And
unchecked
so if you're
power
looking at,
can be very psychotic. I just saw
but
an
if you're
article.
looking at, there's a 1 out of 5 people in positions of power or whatever the
Are
statistics
psychopaths.
are
I believe.
psychopaths and really don't care about
I
good or
totally
bad.
agree with that, David.
They don't think about things in good or bad. So your statements like, oh, like defense is moral, like call like Hasbora.
But yes, at the
That's
same
not how
time,
their
people,
mind works.
well, you're
saying,
right, David.
why do you keep on talking about good and bad, Charles? Good and bad doesn't matter.
David, look, you're right in to say that at high levels of power, there is a psychopathy. I'll give you an example. I was talking to
So, I mean, you
someone.
agree that that means that they don't care about good or
But
bad. All your
you can
statements
take
about
no,
good
no,
or
they
bad
don't. I agree. I
is
do agree with
completely
that.
irrelevant.
I do agree with that. I mean, I'll give you an example. There was this California power company about 10 years ago was like cutting back on power to people so they could raise the money, they could raise, they could make more money. And the result is that a lot of people died because they couldn't get electricity. And you had people who couldn't, were freezing to death, and you had situations, and that there was an investigation in that state of the power company, and they found this to be the case. It ended up resulting in a special election, and the governor lost his office. I think it was Gray Davis. And there were sociologists who went in and looked at this company, and they discovered that at the very top levels, people were psychotic. I mean, they would have these rituals where they would do extreme sports, and they did these things where they would condition people, and they'd really lost touch with their own humanity and reality, really, and that they had unchecked power. That's a given. Of course, at the highest levels of power, and even sometimes lower levels, you have a culture that attracts psychopaths. And if they're at high power, whether it be government or corporations or military, and they're unchecked, then that kind of culture can take over. That's why in this country we developed a system of checks and balances, so that if any one group becomes too powerful, you have other groups that can counter that, not out of altruism, but because they feel that their power is being infringed on and they don't want to see that happen. Like the three branches of our government, they check each other and they balance each other, not because they're so great, but because they protect their own silo. But the result of that balance is that we end up checking this kind of, evil reaction on the part of people in power. Now, having said that, I don't think Israel is particularly afflicted by that on their military. And the reason I say that is because the Israeli military is very much ingrained into the country itself, that the people, everyone serves in the military. They go up for active duty for at least 2 years. Every young man and woman in Israel has to do this, and then they have to go home. And it's such a part of the country that I don't think that they have that kind of psychotic structure that you might get in a military in, say, China or in some dictatorship. And I think the proof of that is that Israel, while they have to deal with warlike situations, and while there are exceptions, for the most part, they go out of their way to not engage in inhumane activity and inhumane activities. They try to, and that can cost Israeli lives. I mean, we could give the example of the Gaza War of 2014, I think it was. Israel sent in an army to stop the terrorists who had this underground infrastructure, the tunnels, and they actually had to go into Gaza with troops to find these tunnels and destroy them. The result was that 85 Israeli soldiers were killed. Now, Israel didn't have to do that. They could have just dropped a bogey on the whole place and been done with it. They could have really gone in heavy, but they didn't, because they did not want to completely inflame the society. They didn't want to completely alienate everyone in Gaza. They did not want to be seen on the world stage as committing terrible atrocities. Instead, they chose to do it in a pinprick way. They went in to just get the people that were killing them and stopping them. And I think that's been the Israeli policy. I mean, there are exceptions, but for the most part, they try to avoid, any unnecessary loss of life on the part of innocent Palestinians. And they try to only target those who are targeting them and take them out, which is a legitimate military, job.
Yeah, I mean, the polling is, it's saying that if you look at the greater establishment and running of the state, they're very careful. But if you look at Israel as a whole, or percentage polling or voice on the street, that it's not so clear, and that obviously Israel has a successful state and military has to be careful about.
That's right, and I think they are to a very high degree.
And who, but I'd say that I was in Israel. A lot of people have conversations and absent of morals, and even within the military establishment, you're saying that do we do it because it's the right or wrong thing, as opposed to a greater calculation that so
they do it because they're defending the life and property of their people,
because we're scared of the consequence of our action. And to say that, okay, like a psychopath doesn't not do wrong things because they morally think it's wrong. They don't do wrong things because they're scared of the consequence of their actions. And to some extent, that's like a
that does check
consciousness level that we don't know if morality is even a real thing.
Yes, we do. And
from a religious point of view, from an atheistic.
No, I think it's a real thing outside of religion. But David, the fact, and we could talk about that.
Maybe say that people are scared of the consequence of their action.
It checks people's psychosis.
Sort of greater drive towards altruism.
It's not altruistic, and I don't claim it is. What it does is, by having the separation of power, it checks the psychosis of people in power to the point where they don't have that kind of power to carry it out. And that's a system of checks and balances. I'm not claiming it's altruistic. At the same time, I do believe that there is an objective morality that exists outside of human manipulation, whether you're religious or not. That's just, I think, something that is a result of human experience. I will point, it's obviously the case of it. It's wrong to murder someone. Is that a religious principle? It is, but it's also a secular principle. It's just part of the human experience from millennia, part of our ability to reason and to create functioning societies. At some point, we came to the conclusion that murder is wrong. And, that's a moral position. It's not just from religion, although I think religion is part of it.
Yeah, but
And-
sages say that most of the 10 Commandments could be derived from pure logic, even had it not been.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
revealed.
God gave us the ability to reason. I mean, that's what made man different that's the moment that man had a soul, is our ability to reason, our ability to understand elements of the universe and to integrate knowledge. I mean, this is what, Dr. E. Michael Jones calls it logos. He claims that somehow Jews don't have any. But, the fact is that, in the Hebrew, there's a word for it. It's called Shekinah. This is the moment when God breathed a soul into Adam, and he could then have reason. He could understand the world. And the very first thing Adam did, even before the creation of Eve, at God's command, was that he named all of the creatures of the world by name. He used language. Language is the vehicle by which we express reason and by which we preserve and advance knowledge. That's part of the human condition. That is how God created us. That's why we are in the image of God, because we have the ability to reason. That doesn't contradict religion. That is religion.
I mean, God forbid, I have, experiential. I did an AMA, Ask Me Anything, on a Discord philosophical server, and I mentioned I'm a universal humanist. We could say to a certain level, I told Adam Green also that Judaism, at least to a certain level, advocates universal humanism, that there's certain, like the Noahide laws, certain minimum standards that are universally applied to all humans. What you're saying, it's not necessarily logical, and there's logic to racism. God forbid. You'll say, I'm a universal.
No, there's not. There's no logic to racism at all.
Well, the us and them mentality.
It's illogical. No, the fact is,
I argued in a Jewish server a few weeks ago, and they didn't agree with me about universal humanism. Like, I got to mention,
that's crazy.
There were like 200 people, and not a single one.
They're crazy. I mean, do they believe that stealing is okay? Did they lock their car out in the driveway? I mean, look, there's certain understandings that exist in nature. Animals understand this. Plants understand this. I mean, this is observable. I mean, to deny that there aren't existing axioms of truth that deal with right and wrong is just insane. We have to, you make decisions every day, millions of decisions that deal with an understanding of what is right and wrong. Doesn't mean you always make the right decision. Doesn't mean you always
argue with atheists quite frequently the last few weeks. And one of the points I make for theism is that you almost necessitate a spiritual realm to have such a thing as karma, action, reaction, good or bad, because whether an action has a good or bad quality to it, if it's not an object of our mind and exists in reality, then it has to be stored somewhere, and that it necessitates the spiritual realm. Like people were joking, like Santa Claus, like he's making a list, he's checking it twice, but like this list that's checking that of whether we behaved good or bad, and whether good things are rewarded and bad things are punished, in essence necessitate a spiritual realm and a God. And like the Buddhist expression, if a tree falls in the forest and no one hears it, if you put God forbid, if someone kills another person and there's no witnesses and no evidence, can they get away with it? And you're saying if there is no spiritual realm, no actual recording that's like, no, you did that deed, even though there's no witnesses and no evidence,
right,
and no court of man is ever going to be able to punish you for it. It's factually there, and there's some sort of divine punishment. But from the atheistic point of view, it's like, no, that concept of good or bad is just a figment of our mind, and there could be agreement among man and
no, they believe it's manufactured by people. I mean, if you look at the Marxist theory, it's the theory of exploitation, that morality, that understanding of these things is made up, it's manufactured by the bourgeoisie in power in order to exploit the proletariat. That there's
social Darwinism,
and that it's at its core, there's nothing real. because
And us
everything
and
is
them,
made up.
people want,
And then
people
they
see
want to
that,
make it up.
people see the elites, they feel the elites are getting away with stuff that, they shouldn't or they want. And, like,
Well, they are.
I'm just
But
gonna, like, die and
they want to control what
we're
is
all just gonna
real.
die and go to sleep forever. So, might as well revolt or resort to crime, or even, God forbid, saying, like, in Israeli mentality, that is, I mean, they use the expression, it's a kill or kill, be rolled.
Right,
Like
but
in
the
Israel
point is
say,
that
like,
there is just, I mean,
don't be a sucker.
you could
So
say
they say,
that
rather
there's
than
no
don't be a
justice
sucker
to somebody
to,
who lives an opulent lifestyle and did it through murder and through crime and through evil acts, whereas somebody who might be a very virtuous person doesn't. Yeah, I guess you could say that in a way there's no real justice in life because we have an imperfect world and we're imperfect people. But I think
well,
the
if there's a
religious,
spiritual realm, you're saying
right, the
that
religious
there is
message
some
is that
factual God and
in the
spiritual
greater
realm.
picture there is justice, and justice will happen even if it's in the next life. I mean, it's not, you can know that a lot of things are internal, and if you have an inner life and you know God, then you have a bigger understanding of these things. I mean, it's like, but the
Well, it's
actual
Maimonides'
physical
principles that the,
material
the
world
righteous
is
get
unjust.
rewarded and the wicked get punished. I mean, it's in this world, not just the next world. The Maimonides, the 13 principles includes that the
Mhm.
righteous get rewarded and the wicked get punished, and
I believe that.
that doesn't just refer to the next world. So you're saying
Well,
as a
look, I
principle
believe that. I mean,
that
somebody could have terrible injustice against them, but they by knowing God, they can put it into a certain context. Whereas somebody who may be an evil person, who on the surface is fantastically successful, they're an empty person. I mean, they don't know God. So they're not in touch with their own evil, and they're not in touch with their own life. We see people like that all the time. I mean, I know people like that. It's like they're not even there. They're like a hologram. There's no person inside. Yeah, they have beauty, they're beautiful, and they've got a great life. Not quite. You know what I'm saying? It's an interest. It's a very complex question. Anyway, David, you know, I guess as I mentioned, the all of a sudden YouTube is sending me strikes and they're taking down the various of my shows. And I guess that they're going to let me back up next week. I'm not going to go back up on YouTube. I don't trust YouTube. I'm going to maybe go just to make an announcement that I'm not doing. I'm not going to I'm not going to download shows on YouTube, maybe unless I'm going to talk about how to bake cookies. I mean, but I'm not going to do what I'm doing on YouTube. I just don't trust it. So what I've done is I'm switching over to Rumble, and I'm going to be promoting that once I get my website redrawn, so that Rumble is going to be the centerpiece of the program that I will be launching on January 1st in about a week from today, about a week and a half from today.
I mean, from
And
my perspective, I mean, in my recommendation to you, like
yeah,
Half Galician was messaging me on Twitter as we were talking, is to have at least one venue. It's probably simplest one where you have a chat and can make it interactive, because, like, say
well,
with the
I
nature
need to
of
figure that out.
programming
No, I agree.
today, you need to. I mean, people might call in, but it's easier to have
You're right. I
people
need to figure that
want
out.
to
And
chat. So
YouTube,
if Rumble has a live chat,
yeah, I don't know
that's
if
fine.
Rumble
I'll
does.
direct people to
Thank you.
Rumble, and then it could be interactive where people are watching.
No, I agree. I
Crowdsource
need to figure
information.
out which of the sites that are carrying the show do have a live chat. And once I get that, I'm going to
Trovo, D
promote that.
Live. I mean, and there's
D Live
benefits.
does? Because
Yeah, they all have
I'm live
live.
on D Live.
Yeah,
And
they're saying that YouTube was the majority, but if I shared it on your Twitter or my social media, just the one that people are watching live, to that you could be interactive with, because good
right.
programming requires being
But if I shared
interactive.
it on your
See,
Twitter
look, I
and
just
social
looked.
media,
I'm live on D Live right
it's the
now.
one that
Do they have a chat room? Yeah. So with this program, I'm watching it right now. We are live on D Live. D Live is one of the 10 live streams that carry this show. So if you go to D Live, first of all, if you go to my website, Charles Moscowitz, you can click on D Live. I'm going to be just configuring it so it'll be a little easier, but I'm live on D Live. I'm looking at it right now. There is a chat room there. you can go to that station. Maybe I'll figure out how to promote that a little bit more, but I can take chats on D Live while I do the show. So, and there's
It probably
probably a
makes
couple.
more sense. I mean, you've been talking to a lot of people that have been saying that, like, to rather than keep on trying to navigate the, the censorship, especially because,
Yeah,
the election and Trump, or even COVID.
that's right.
You probably even, even just talking about Jewish subjects
Oh, yeah,
are all issues that you're going to face the ban hammer on constantly. That
exactly.
you're
And I'm
probably
tired,
better off
tired of
not even
worrying
trying
about it.
YouTube,
Yeah,
and then building up. I mean, if you have it set up to build up on all of these, but then that you want to build up a community, that the community's there and can have some sort of conversation
that's right.
actively, that you're at least monitoring one of the chats that
Yeah, I think I'm going to focus on D Live because I'm looking at it now. It looks great. I have a chat room there. I'm going to promote that because I can take chats. And, I am just really tired of worrying with YouTube, that looking over my shoulder and wondering when I'm going to get taken down. And I'm afraid that I'm going to turn on the app and find out that they've taken the whole thing down. And sure enough, that's what's happening. So
Yeah,
maybe it's
I
a
mean,
blessing
financially,
in
a lot of the
disguise.
professionals, their consideration is super. I mean, if you're not getting that many super chats or super chats at all, I mean, super chats also become a consideration. What percentage
Well, where can I get
of,
super chats?
well, I mean, you actually need people that are paying to, super chat comments. But, YouTube takes a huge cut, like 30-40% of super chat.
And YouTube won't
And
let
so
me do
there's
that
other,
anymore.
there's other entropy, I think takes the least amount, like 3-5%.
Yeah.
But, from the biggest streamers, that's their consideration is
Okay.
the percentage of the cut. But I mean, you got to build up so that you're actually getting super
Build up an
chats to,
audience. So yeah, I mean, I have to say, I feel relieved in a way that the YouTube thing is coming down right now, just before I launched the show, because I expected it anyways. And I'm tired this whole past year of worrying all the time about YouTube and looking over my shoulder and thinking, oh my, I said this, I said that. And there are a lot of people I want to interview about things that are forbidden on YouTube. And
it's going to get worse probably. I mean,
oh, I'm sure it is.
I forget the Facebook whistleblower, but like every day she's in the news speaking to another organization.
Yeah.
And I mean, I saw in some of the UN's report, or their take on it, that it's I mean, it's a fake whistleblower because she's blowing the whistle that they didn't censor enough. That
Oh yeah, no, they're very open about it. I mean, you take a look at the Shorenstein Center over here at Harvard, which is studying the internet. They're open about stopping, quote, misinformation, unquote, right?
like
Who
the call
decides
to
what
more and
that
more
is?
censorship.
Oh
So
yeah, no,
I don't think your show will be successful. And like if you PG'd it down, it probably wouldn't be interesting. So you're
no,
probably
I'm not
better
going
off
to do it.
just going to more open venues.
I'm
I'm
going
happy
to
keep
more
on
open
working with
venues.
you on like on maybe we'll even have better luck with the show on that way.
I think so. I think so. And I think that YouTube has been algorithming me anyways this past year. I've been told by a number of people that my subscribers would be like 10 times what it is if I wasn't being algorithmed. I've also been told by a number of people over time, and this is more than anecdotal, that they did subscribe to me on YouTube, and then suddenly that subscription just disappeared without their knowing it.
Well,
And
I'd also say it's going to be old-fashioned networking, not like like algorithm of Rumble or one of these other sites is going to magically put you in front of an audience. It's going to be
oh, I know,
old-fashioned self-promotion,
sure,
sharing, networking, talking to people, telling their friends, and it's the most important part is probably the interactive chat with to get people watching, and then be
exactly.
interactive with the people who are watching, so that it becomes like an event that more and more people and people calling in. But I wouldn't count on the algorithm from any of these.
Oh, no, I want to make
get you to know
connections.
people.
I want to get the program in front of people that might be simpatico and try to reach out. And again, I mean, now I can get the chats on D Live. So you can go to D Live and just put my name in the server, Moscowitz, and you'll get the page. It says dlive.tv/Moscowitz. And
I mean, there's advantages and disadvantages. Like one, it does the video archive there later. Is it just a live platform?
it's a lot. Well, you know what? I think in the case
it's archived.
No, I don't think they do.
And then it's archived. So some of them, like Entropy, and I think D Live, doesn't archive it.
No, they
so
don't
just
archive.
plays it like where Trovo, I think, actually archives and stores it. And then if it's something like
Well, let me
upload
look at
afterwards.
Trovo.
So I mean, you have to think about that. If I mean, Trovo
Yeah.
has a chat, or Odyssey's the pretty popular one. That so Odyssey, it's live. You get super chats, and it archives it as opposed to D
Yes,
Live.
you're right. They don't
It's not
archive.
archived. So I mean, Odyssey's probably the one of choice right now. But yeah, the problem with D Live is that if you focus on that, it's not archived afterwards.
Here, I'm looking right now, David, at Trovo. There I am, up live and archived and chats. So Trovo is even better.
Is
So
I shared-
Trovo is even better.
is there someone? Yeah, I mean, you just put the volume down.
I just did.
I shared it on my Facebook and Twitter and Trovo, but is any so there's just one viewer. So I mean,
You can check out the show. Let me just say this. Check out the show on Trovo. It's trovo.live/Charles Moscowitz. And you can get to all of these stations by just going to my website, charlesmoskowitz.com. And you'll find all of these venues. And as you say, Trovo has a chat and an archive.
Well, I would recommend, like figure out, when you say, what you're saying, just say, and you will be monitoring or active with the chat if it's Trovo or whatever one that so if people are watching on any venue, that's fine. But if they want to interact with you, that you're telling them which platform that you'll be reading the chat and interacting, and then maybe you could build up callers too. But I think
that's right. I want to build up following on all of these various venues. They're all amazing, and I also
you have to monitor the chat. Like I mean, like if you're I mean you might be able to build a following and people watching, but generally people want an interactive program. So unless you're capable of being interactive on all of them.
I am into, well, I probably, I don't know if I could be interactive on all of them. Actually, I probably could only be interactive on one of them.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. Like,
and I'll have to choose
you could post them to all of them and people might watch them, but focus, or at least when you're speaking, to mention that you're being interactive. So if anyone wants to chat, at least one of them you're monitoring or you're answering the chat.
I think I'm going to probably figure out which of these ones is best to do the chat. I have a feeling it's probably going to be Trovo since they also archive, and I'm going to then promote that. But the other thing with this program is you can actually call in 617-396-4958. I have the Skype up. I've had calls before. You can literally get on the show and talk and be heard. You can
random, like I don't watch Trovo. I usually watch things in 2-speed.
Yeah.
So I believe that Trovo doesn't offer speed changes. So Odyssey offers 2-speed. And I mean, there's various factors and there's various reasons, and censorship also. I think Odyssey is the main platform that people are using that has the least censorship. Trovo might also, like if you built up, you have some censorship. I'm not sure if you're live yet on Odyssey.
I'm not.
But that's the
and
main
the reason I'm not
platform
is because, frankly, it'll cost me to do that, to get Odyssey up on my on Restream.
So I mean, the main thing, we'll network and try.
And I'm very limited funds.
The audience, unfortunately, like that Todd from, I was going to try to book Todd from Politically Provoked, and I'm not sure where they're showing. Like, God forbid that they're becoming quite anti-Semitic on that channel, which kind of random, or a leftist channel. But he didn't get back to me about booking the show. Although, I think we'll be able to book guests for you, and reaching out, or maybe like Claire Call, or you have to think about all or any kind of guest. If you're doing 5 nights a week, then you might be able to have all or any type of guest. If if you wanted to aim for a certain type,
No, I want a cross section of people. I want to have professors and thinkers and different people from different walks of life, left, right, and center. And I also want to take calls and have it an interactive program with chat, and just develop an online experience.
Work on like sister shows that are cross promoting, that will feed guests back and forth to each other.
Yes. Well, I mean, David, if you could be helpful by sending me some of the names of some of those shows, and I'd like to contact them and do some we could do some cross broadcasting and all of it.
Yeah,
So,
so we'll
yeah.
keep on working on it. Unfortunately, Todd from Politically Provoked didn't come through.
No, that one doesn't sound like
maybe,
it's for me anyways. If they're going anti-Semitic, I don't know. I don't want to, it'll give me a toothache, to be
yeah, I mean,
honest.
God forbid. I mean, because it's, I guess, a recent shift, but yeah, there's plenty of other shows,
Yeah,
and constantly. I mean, just get an interview and getting out there, booking yourself on other shows,
sure.
and then cross networking.
Yeah,
guests,
that's right. Yeah.
even if it's smaller, start with
Oh, yeah,
smaller,
doesn't
like
matter.
even like Claire Carr or something like that,
Sure.
where I mean, she was able to land a big name like Joseph Atwill,
Hmm.
or even Adam Green. I mean, if he has he doesn't have that many guests really that
Right.
but yeah, I mean, we should be able to so hopefully you pray that holiday break things will go well
Oh,
next
yeah.
next
I'm looking forward to it. I
the
mean,
next Roman year will be
Roman year.
very bountiful and blessing for
Yeah,
everybody.
absolutely. It's I think that New Year's Day is the anniversary of Jesus' circumcision. Anyways, David, what do you have coming on this week? Anything?
Nothing. I'm speaking with T Jump on January 3rd, and he's one of the house debaters on Modern Day Debate, a prominent atheist. And he's got a pretty big following. He gets a few hundred live viewers.
Yeah.
He's got thousands of people in his Discord. His YouTube gets thousands of views.
What is
And
Discord anyway?
Discord's like a chat server,
Okay.
message board where you could make your own room and server, and then have your own multiple chats, and it also has a voice. So a lot of bigger servers, you could take calls actually from Discord. So if you have a big Discord, people could chat, and then they could do voice chat, and then you could rather than call in, they could filter that into probably even your Zoom. But it's pretty one of the it's pretty big. There's tens of millions of users
Right.
on Discord. So but that's more messages. And if you actually had like a fan base of people that wanted to have conversations, one that they could message, and it's easier that you could they could message, and then you could get back to them any point during
Okay.
the next day, and you could create topical rooms. And when you're trying to create a community, people might have questions for you, but really they want to talk with each other more
Sure.
than the host. So if you have a big Discord, most of the conversation is people talking with each other, and then there'll be some questions for you. So
Okay.
if you don't have to make a Discord. I was just mentioning that.
No, I understand. I noticed that this
you
part of what like
so I got
Facebook
T-Jump
Messenger.
he's an atheist.
Mhm.
I think he comes from a Catholic background. He's pretty smart, pretty big streamer.
Well, let's have him on.
And so January 3rd, Monday, I guess that's 11 a.m. I'm booked on
Excellent.
his channel. That's the only thing booked I have coming up. I might finally put out on my channel like these Ask the Rabbis, where I'm going to go over the history of the Jewish Gentile distinction, and the Jewish conception of the soul. And also have prepared the research already for Ask the Rabbi on biblical slavery and Talmudic slavery, the history of Jews in
Mhm.
slavery going back to ancient times, because obviously the Bible and the Talmudic text that slavery was a prominent part of our ancient culture. So maybe hopefully
All
next week I'm
cultures.
going to put out one of those. I'll probably start with the first one, either on the soul, Jewish conception of the soul, or the history of the Jewish Gentile distinction with the Noahide laws. It's actually interesting scholarship, like from the Greeks to Roman and biblical time, and how did we view ourselves in the early biblical period, and how that changed through Roman times to the Jewish Gentile distinction we have today, and the origins of the Noahide laws.
Right. Well,
So modern day debate. My streaming partner, Jennifer Scharf, calls herself Church of Entropy. She's been on Modern Day Debate, and they've been a pretty big platform. I think they're over 500,000 subs now. They get a few hundred viewers, and they have like theology and politics. They have a lot of debates on Islam,
Mhm.
Christianity, atheism. So I mean, T-Jump was
Right.
a house atheist debater, but they've moved into an IRL in real life uh, 2-day symposium debate event in Texas that they've been doing. They've probably been the biggest debate platform on the web, doing about 3 a week. Most of their videos get thousands, sometimes tens of thousands of views and hundreds of live viewers, and they also are making money, super chats
Mhm.
and fundraising. So he is putting up his own money and raising money. In January 15th and 16th in Texas, they're making
Uh-huh.
live events, and so this guy Ben Watkins is in a circuit of atheistic and theological debates. So I might try to. That debate was pretty well received. Already has over
That's
400
amazing.
views.
Yeah,
So
I'd like to have them on. I mean, that sounds really interesting.
yeah, maybe I could book Ben
My show's
Watkins or
maybe not big
something. But
enough for them. I don't know. Whatever.
well, I mean, a lot of these people like talking. They'll talk to anybody.
Okay.
But I mean, there's a whole network of like there's a channel called Capturing Christianity, um, and there's also a few atheist channels that different
Oh,
people will
atheism is
network
huge.
and
I
bounce
mean,
together.
Greg
So,
Epstein is he's an atheist chaplain at Harvard now. I don't know if you heard that.
who's that again?
Greg Epstein, he's an atheist, outspoken atheist and humanist.
Well,
He
sounds
has just,
Jewish. Jewish
well, he
ethnic
has a
to it.
Jewish background, I'm sure, but he recently was named as the chaplain at Harvard, the Harvard, church.
So if
And
you've seen
I
like, I mean,
interviewed him years ago. I don't think he'd come on with me now, but
so I mean, the ADL and the SPLC make these like hate maps or something for streaming, but all streaming, all networking have this overlay of common guests. So I mean, it's
I
like
should look at the
if
ADL
it's
hate
like so,
map.
like
That would
E-Mike,
probably could be a good source of guests.
well, I mean, God forbid, but I mean, maybe some like Kevin Barrett or something.
Well, yeah, that's
But
another.
I'm saying that a lot of these people network and appear on each other's show. So
Yes.
something like E. Michael Jones and like Adam Green, or like
Mhm.
they bounce around. But it's if it's like Capturing Christianity, there's a different network of people that talk about theology. So like Theology Unleashed is actually based in New Zealand, and they're growing. They have over 6,000
Wow.
subs, and
Okay.
my video might, it's already got a few hundred views, but they have bigger guests that even got tens of thousands of views. But there's all sorts of different topics with networks, and a lot of times if you get in good, because that's what we do. We stream, we talk to people.
Right.
So generally, like if someone wants to book us for a show, we'll do it, even if it's a smaller venue, and then you could get cross network, and then you might even be able to, if you have a good interview or good rapport, you could even like Ralph, like he actually, I think he called you, like he's got a
Yes.
network
Mhm.
of guests in Europe, and saying like, if you had good rapport with Ralph, he could probably feed you tens
Yeah,
of
we
guests.
should get him
He
on.
was mentioning
He's
he's
been
trying to
mentioning.
land um Roger Penrose, Sir Roger Penrose, just won the Nobel Prize. I'm not sure if he's going to be able to land him, but
No, he's very good. He was a guest on my show. He's very
I
good.
mean, he Goldman Sachs. He worked for Goldman Sachs, but
Right.
started in Boston.
Mhm. Great.
But
So
yeah,
these
so
are
like
all-
any of those type people, like Ralph, if you work through his networks. I work through his speaker, like I mentioned, Speaker's Corner, and
Mhm.
I've already worked through and spoken to tens of people that are on Speaker's Corner. I've only been to London once, and that was like 20 years ago. But in the last few months, I've spoken to tens of the regulars on Speaker's Corner. So like even
Yeah.
so any one of those networks, if you have you could get on a show, and then you have a good performance, so that a whole bunch of people in the network, they all see it. Because if they're on the platform, like, okay, like I'm on your show weekly, I check your show, but any of the people that are on your show regularly, they're probably checking the other guests. And then if you appear on another show,
Mhm.
then and you have a good show, then that show's regular guests are going to check you, and then that,
Right. It kind of
and then you
cross
could invite
pollinate,
them.
and everybody
Yeah, so
builds their audience from each other. No, I get that, and
It's
wanna
also,
get-
providence, like business, like sales
Yeah,
or something
sure.
like that.
No,
Where
absolutely.
it's divine providence. God works in mysterious ways, but
Indeed.
yeah, I mean, you could have a dud, 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 and then one thing leads exponentially to, God forbid, like
Yeah, a
COVID
door
or the
opens.
virus spreading exponentially, but also good publicity and spreading your guests exponentially. That one good show gets you guests, and then you get into cross pollen, however you want to describe it. So
No, absolutely. It's how you do it. It's like you develop a pipeline.
we have to be
So,
professional. Also, you have to be responsive.
yeah,
So like I mean, like me and you, we're doing it all by ourselves. It's too expensive. Or if you got like kids or students or teacher assistants, but you gotta be responsive. You gotta check your messages. You have to. And so like if you are making all these various platforms, then then you have to check your messages, because then people might message you
sure.
and you don't
And
see
then
it.
you get response. Yeah, exactly. I try to
I mean,
do that.
you have to be responsive. And
Yeah,
if it's Twitter or Facebook or whatever, you have to make it clear that you're like on your accounts that say that this is the one that you check your messages on, because you have to be responsive. And it could be like the thing that like, oh man, like like I had my big take, and I noticed like 3 weeks ago that like I didn't even see the
didn't
message.
see it. No, I try to look at all of those. I mean, mostly in my case, Twitter, the conventional ones, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. But anyway, David, listen, let's talk next week. And as always, I appreciate you coming on, and be well.
Okay, yeah, Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat
Happy
shalom.
holidays to everybody watching. Be blessed, and look forward to next week.
All right, David, take care.